Dominique Flux from Flux Jewelry, and today we're going to be covering sentimental jewelry and more specifically what the trends were over the decades and even centuries and like the influential people who wore these trends. So what is sentimental jewelry? Sentimental jewelry is basically jewelry that's been commissioned in order to like commemorate a loved one. It can be for people who have passed, but it's also for like the living as well. So like just to like start this off, because jewelry is one of those things that are sentimental for the most part in general. So I'm sure there were trends before this, but we're kind of covering up one of the significant ones from like the medieval times onwards. One of the first kind of trends that we saw was called posy rings. Posy was derived from the word poesy, which means poems in French. Basically what it was they were bands, so rings, that had been inscribed with poems or saying or phrases, names, on the inside of the band, and these were given between lovers, between friends as well. And they were believed that because you had the words and everything inscribed on the inside, having it in contact with your skin, these messages were believed to be more poignant. This trend is something that we still see today. I do a lot of engagement rings, and we always have something engraved on the inside of the ring. Usually it tends to be more like dates or cute little sayings, little symbols. So this is something that has survived time, which I think is really cool. So next we have what we call acrostic jewelry. This came around in the Georgian era, and it kind of peaked in the Victorian era. It was also known as the language of stones, because what this trend was it was actually they would take the first letter of each gemstone to spell a word. So you would have, for example, lapis lazuli, you would have opals, you would have vermeil, which was also known as garnet at the time, and E for emeralds. So that would spell love. And so you would have an array of gemstones that would hide these kind of like secret messages. This trend was said to have been invented by Jean-Baptiste de Melerio. He was actually the jeweler and designer of Marie Antoinette, and he also did most of the jewelry for the French court at the time. So within the Georgian era, it was a lot more kind of like, I don't want to say kitsch, but it was a lot more obvious. So they would have a lot more hearts, they would have like lockets with keys to symbolize love, you know, etc. So these were really given as tokens of love. Versus in the Victorian era, it was a lot more discreet. And part of the reason why was because during this time period, it was a lot harder to like date. The dating scene, if you will, was a lot more, how can I say, strict. You know, when women and men were courting, they had to be, you know, accompanied by a chaperone. They could only be seen in public places. Even conversation had to be done with kind of like supervision. So this was like a little fun way of giving a meaningful gift that kind of had like little secret messages within them. So that's why they were very much loved during the Victorian period. They were not as obvious as the previous era. In the 17 to 1800s, we saw what we called the lover's eye. So this was the same concept as the discreet dating scene in the Victorian era. It was originally seen by the Prince of Wales, who had commissioned, also later known as King George IV. He had originally commissioned a miniature painter to basically paint on top of ivory with watercolor the eye of his lover, Maria Fitzherbert. So he had basically painted her eye, and he wore it underneath his shirt lapel in like complete discretion. Their union at the time was frowned upon, and so this was like a, I don't know, I think it's like a really cute way of him secretly sharing his love for her, because the whole point of it was basically nobody could identify just like a single eye on a pendant. So it was kind of like a sentimental piece that nobody else knew who was on it. So it was kind of like a cute way, I think, of like having that like hidden love. They could be done in any way. It's not like a specific to lockets. You could have them pendants, you could have them as rings, brooches. Of course, other people eventually adopted to this, like Queen Victoria. Of course. I think I have to do like a single YouTube video on her because she has commissioned so many interesting pieces. She was really a trendsetter in terms of jewelry. But her, again, also adapted to this trend. She had commissioned miniaturist pieces of like a lot of her loved ones, a lot of her children, people like in her family. So this was a trend that was most popular. It didn't have like a huge lifespan. So this is also a trend that you're not going to see today, just for the simple facts that like they would use ivory as a base to paint with watercolor or with gouache the eyes or small symbols of their loved ones. Ivory, as you know, is the tusks of elephants, so that's not possible today. It's basically the black market. So next we have lockets. So lockets started appearing as early as like the 16th century. They were the descendants of amulets, and they had kind of evolved, and they weren't just actually used for holding like elements of loved ones. Originally they had actually been used to carry like gunpowder. They were used to having like little pieces of fabric with perfume dipped in it, even poison. So obviously today we see them specifically more sentimental, so you see them more for like portraits. Lockets were also very important during World War I and World War II, in the sense that people going out to war or people back home could carry around lockets with pictures of their loved ones, and they have a very significant part in the region of like sentimental jewelry. You don't see this so much today, but lockets were also used to carry things like hair. Like in the 1800s, there was a huge wave of like hair jewelry. It could be for the deceased or a living person in your life. If you want to like commemorate them in any way, you could have hair jewelry within your locket. These were actually like intricately woven. They were actually like hair kind of like artists who would dedicate their lives to weaving hair because it was such a popular trend, especially in mourning jewelry. Like I actually have a whole video down below for mourning jewelry where we cover like this entire trend. I'm not gonna get too much into it because it's very creepy, and if you want to learn about it, you can watch that video. But there's also different trends of like post-mortem photography in lockets as well. There's a time period in the late 1800s, early 1900s that people would actually take pictures of their deceased and incorporate it. Very creepy, but yeah, I'll link it down below. So those are all things that you see kind of like within lockets. So today lockets are super common as well. We still see them with photography, we still see them with engraving. Lockets are fun because they generally have like a flat back, so you can have a lot more engraving. In the 1900s to today, we have things like eternity bands. So if you don't know what an eternity band is, it's basically a ring that has diamonds or gemstones 360 degrees around the band. It basically signifies unbroken devotion. These were rings that were worn, like famously worn by like Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly. Between you and me though, it's not a good idea to get a full eternity band just because of sizing. So if you ever need to get your ring resized, it's a bit of a hassle resizing a full eternity band, but that's another subject. So anyways, so a lot of the sentimental jewelry that I see today actually has to do a lot with birthstones. I get a lot of requests for birthstones because it's believed that like every month of the year has a certain birthstone that kind of like goes with it, and these birthstones have their own meanings. And a lot of people like to give gifts, you know, like lovers will give like a pendant with like the recipient's birthstone on it. It's a fun way of kind of showing that like you put a little bit more thought into it. I think it goes along a little bit of the lines of like the crystals and stuff. Like some people even believe that having it touching your skin, you absorb like the properties more. A lot of clients will ask for their birthstone and the recipient's birthstone on the inside of like their wedding bands. I think it's super cute. Sentimental jewelry today has grown in the sense that like because of the technology that we have to make jewelry, like we have 3D design now, and so it's really easy to commission a jeweler to make like crazy things. You can have all these little tokens or emblems or little symbols within a piece that you can commission your jeweler to basically incorporate, and these little symbols represent stories or times or people or places that only you know about. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this video. We do a lot more history videos, so if you do want to check them out, I think I mentioned the morning video, so make sure you check that one out. And yeah, I'd love to see you next time. Bye!